How scholars have interpreted Newton's views on action at a distance in gravity and on God's role in making gravitational interaction intelligible. These interpretations rely mainly on Newton's Principia, his correspondence with Richard Bentley, and the Opticks queries. Andrew Janiak's view is that Newton denied gravity could be essential to matter, rejected direct action at a distance, and did not accept a material substance as the mediator of gravity. On this reading, Newton allowed instead for an immaterial medium, which Janiak associates closely with God. Stephen Duchesne is arguing that Newton never accepted direct remote action and allowed only material intervention or immaterial substance as possible explanations. Hilarie Kochiras's interpretation is more ambivalent. According to her, Newton tended to reject direct action and favored an intangible environment. Yet in speculative moments, he shifted between accepting and rejecting direct remote action. For Kochiras, Newton's claims about God's virtual and substantial omnipresence, together with the idea that force must subsist in substance, imply a hidden commitment to local action. Erich Schleicher represents a contrasting view, arguing that Newton did not categorically reject the idea that matter could be active and therefore accepted the possibility of direct action at a distance. Schleicher also emphasizes Newton's distinction between God's virtual omnipresence and substantial omnipresence. John Henry is another scholar who thinks direct remote action was not inconceivable for Newton. Henry's Newton rejects a subtle matter explanation of gravity, accepts the idea of an omnipotent God, and rejects Epicurean attraction. In comparing these views, my conclusion is that Newton refused both direct action as an intrinsic property of bodies and remote action mediated by a material ether. However, I argue that Newton remained undecided between two other possibilities, namely direct divine intervention and mediation through an immaterial environment. In both remaining alternatives, God remains central, either acting directly or serving as the primary cause behind an immaterial ether as secondary cause. I suggest that Newton's reluctance to openly affirm direct action reflected a worry that it would support the idea that gravity is essential to matter, which Newton associated with atheistic implications. Toward the end of his life, Newton is said to have leaned toward remote action mediated by an immaterial ether while searching for a more phenomenological explanation. I keep the term remote action even for mediated cases because Newton used it for motion not produced by direct bodily contact. I support this by pointing to Newton's Opticks Query 29 and draft formulations asking by what means bodies act upon one another at a distance. The overall narrative is that Newton's theory of gravity opened a difficult space between mechanics, metaphysics, and theology, and later scholars differ over whether Newton filled that space with direct divine action, an immaterial medium, or a carefully unresolved possibility.